4 months ago, if I told you that besides League, Riot would be releasing 2 new games within less than a year, no one would believe me. And 2 days ago, if I told you that Project A would be released in about 5 months, you would think of me as a fool who trusts 4chan too much. What you didn't know, however, is that we are dealing with Riot Games, the company that stomped into the room without a single care about our expectations, and they carelessly decided to crush all our ideas of reality and release their games about a year earlier. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, yesterday the embargo surrounding Project A was lifted, and with it the internet was flooded with a lot of information on Riot's third game. The thing is, right now, there is so much information out there that it is hard to keep track of what was revealed. But don't worry, that's why I'm here. I ventured around the internet and gathered all the info there is about the game. The majority of it came from journalists, with Polygon being a big player here. Unfortunately, because there are a few different sources of information, this video may not be structured so well. So excuse me if I accidentally jump from topic to topic. But now, because I know all of you are anxious to know what the heck is happening, let's dive right into it. It all started with a rather simple teaser. All it did was reveal the name of the game, which is Valorant, and the release date, which for now is summer 2020. Just so you know, that's in about 5 months from now, so it is right behind the corner. The name Valorant is interesting because about a week ago, there was a hidden trademark under Riot Games with the same name. Weirdly enough, that trademark looked fake, so it is a surprise to me to see that Valorant is real after all. Next, we got info that wasn't in the teaser, but it was confirmed by the developers. As we all know, Valorant is Project A, which is the first-person shooter. Project A stands for Project Ares, and Ares is part of Valorant's universe, because not only is one of the guns in the game called Ares, but the developers are wearing jackets that say Ares Production Unit. So in the end, Ares might be the evil corporation of this universe. It was also confirmed that Valorant will be free to play. The monetization will likely be skins for the characters, which in this game are called agents, and perhaps even some gun skins. When it comes to the universe of Valorant, despite the name resembling the main continent of Runeterra, Valorant is in its own separate universe. In fact, the story is taking place in near-future Earth. Some of the agents might reference things from Runeterra. For example, CZECH is wearing a mark resembling Shurima. But that's either just a reference, or it is possible that League of Legends is a game in the world of Valorant. After all, Valorant is happening on future Earth. And speaking of what the agents wear, after Riot released their gameplay trailer, some people criticized the models of the characters for 2 reasons. First of all, some people say that the agents look somewhat generic. To which I say, you are right when you compare them to something like Overwatch. But that's because Blizzard are masters of unique character designs. With that said, there is a really good reason why Valorant's characters look a bit more generic. And that's tied to the second complaint people have. Many people don't like the fact that everyone looks the same, and they run with the same animations. But what they don't realize is that it is on purpose. You see, in Overwatch, all characters look different because Blizzard didn't care about different character sizes. And just like in League, where you can instantly tell what champion you are against because they all have unique shapes, Overwatch plays by the same rules. All Overwatch characters are vastly different, just so it would be easier to recognize them all the moment you see them. However, not only is that not what Riot wants, it's not something Riot needs. Because although it is true that just like in Overwatch, Valorant also has different characters with different abilities. Unlike in Overwatch, none of the abilities in Valorant are instant win if you use them. In Valorant, it is more along the lines of one character has flashbang and the other one has a smoke grenade. Therefore, there is no need to separate them visually. And in fact, this gives Riot the freedom to make the game way more competitive than you might think. Those of you who played early Apex Legends know the issues the game had with hitboxes. The main reason why none of the pros played Gibraltar or Caustic was because their hitboxes were massive compared to someone like Wraith, who is much harder to hit. On top of that, all characters had the exact same health pool, so being a bigger target was clearly a disadvantage. That's why in Overwatch Roadhog is massive, but he also has loads of health. Riot knows about this issue, and that's why they made sure that all of their characters have the exact same size, they have the same hitboxes, and they have the same animations. Although this is why none of the agents' designs really stand out, since none of the agents have a clear advantage over the others. Now, I know I mentioned Overwatch a lot so far, but that was more for visual comparisons. In reality, Riot doesn't aim to compete with Overwatch. Overwatch is far too fast of a game. It is frantic, it's nothing but action, and that's why it is an awful esport to watch. If you have ever watched an Overwatch tournament, you know what I'm talking about. Because there are about 5 plays happening every 10 seconds, it's really hard to keep track of what is happening, and it all turns into a mush of explosions and flying bullets. On the other side, you may have something like CSGO, where every play is calculated, and there are moments of anticipation before a team decides to execute a plan. And that's what Riot is going for. Watching something like CSGO or Rainbow Six Siege is a much better experience because it is much slower and more tactical. And as you'll see, Valorant is even using the classic bomb planting that drove Counter-Strike for years now. And just like in those other tactical shooters, Valorant also doesn't have respawns. That is, unless you play a character that can resurrect you. But even that isn't really an issue here. And that's because Riot has a genius design in their game that many people may not know about. You see, just like in CSGO, at the beginning of each round, you are able to buy guns or abilities. Which may sound weird, but it's actually genius. This way you have multiple ways to spend your money. You can buy guns to be more offensive, or you can buy armor to be more defensive. Or you can buy one charge of one of your abilities which give you unique utility. That's why no matter how powerful an ability is, it's not really an issue here, because you still need to spend money to be able to use it. Money with which you could have bought a gun instead. So in the end, the system is self-balancing. You sacrifice offensive weapons to gain utility instead. There seem to be some exceptions though. We will talk about this later, but it seems like each agent also has an ultimate ability. You're not able to buy these with money, but you need to reach certain score to be able to use it. So again, it is all about skill. And even then, the ultimate abilities are not press R to win. But again, we will talk about this later. Now, before we move on to the big Polygon article, where they had a chance to interview the developers, there is one thing I wanted to mention: the sound design. To me at least, all the weapons sound a bit like Nerf guns right now. And when one of the characters fires a bow, it doesn't really have the swoosh effect following the arrow. But that's something Riot can fix later. What I want to praise, however, is the music. Right now, the only piece of music we have heard is the main theme. And boy, is it simple and good. And this takes us to the Polygon article, where, once again, I'm going to quickly sum up all the important information. First of all, the development of Valorant started 6 years ago, which for reference is when Yasuo was released. They wanted to take the live service system from League, where they keep adding in more and more champions, and put that system into a game like CSGO, which is a game that doesn't evolve further. League of Legends is one of the very few games in the world that keeps moving forward, so I don't think Riot would have an issue doing the same for Valorant. Champions were confirmed to be called agents, each of which have their own special abilities. However, the gameplay is still focused on gunplay. Agents only add flavor on top of that. Riot also revealed that Valorant was always built to be a competitive game. They hired Salvador Garrozo, a former pro Counter-Strike player, to help them design the maps. This is interesting because I remember when 5 years ago, Riot started hiring people with FPS experience. And back then, everyone talked about it. But over time, everyone forgot. So it is cool to see it resurface 5 years later with a new game. But Riot knew what kind of games they would be competing against. And they realized that although all the other shooters are really good, they all shared one negative aspect.
Cheaters.
Cheating in an FPS game is much harder to catch compared to cheating in League. A few years back, Riot implemented a system for League that can automatically detect 99% of all cheat attempts. That's why cheaters are extremely rare in League compared to other games. And because it was such a success, Riot got the person who gave League its anti-cheat, and they moved him onto Valorant. And this is the result. Instead of looking for cheaters once Valorant was released, Riot developed the game with cheating in mind. Similar to how every League game spits out all the stats and even a heat map showing you your movement after every game, the server authenticates everything that is happening in every Valorant match as well, which is usually nearly impossible to implement into an FPS game. You can only imagine how the server is recording every little mouse movement every second for every player. But if you develop a game for this system for the ground up, it is suddenly much easier. And that's what Riot did. So the number of cheaters in Valorant should be much lower compared to something like Counter-Strike or Call of Duty. And speaking of servers, Riot will also be using high tick rates for their servers, which we saw in their original announcement during the 10th anniversary. Essentially, this means that people won't be able to shoot you behind the corner. But this also means that in order for you to have a good experience, you also need a slightly more reliable internet, which hopefully shouldn't be too much of an issue these days. All this talk about anti-cheat and server speed is also related to another massive thing. During Valorant's development, gameplay was a priority. At first, they didn't even think about what kind of a setting or what kind of a world the game would be in. They focused on making the game fun first. All the pretty polish would come later. Which is great because this is how Nintendo makes their games, which usually turn out to be successful. One famous way how Nintendo tests their games is by swapping all the pretty assets with simple pixels. A Mario game should still be fun even if you play as a block instead of Mario. And that's what Riot did here too. No matter what the game looks like, if it is fun, the visual design just gives it flavor. With that said, Riot pulled champion designers from League to design agents for Valorant, and they try to make sure each character stands out, with their main philosophy being that all agents should look like important NPCs, each of them being a protagonist. But as we mentioned, they had to do that within the scope of everyone being the same size with the same animations. So we will see how successful they were when the game is released. Then the article introduced David Nottingham, which is the creative director. This is the person who is responsible for giving Valorant its own world. When he arrived on the team, most of the gameplay side was already working, but he still rebooted a lot of things to make sure Valorant was a great standalone IP. In fact, giving Valorant a narrative side was quite a challenge. Most of the game was ready to go, and there were many different aspects of the game that had no connections whatsoever. Again, that's because gameplay and fun were priority. And yet, David Nottingham had to connect it all with one world. He confirmed that each game, there will be a chance that the characters will have a short dialogue among each other, and that's how they will hint at some deeper relationships, which is somewhat similar to how Overwatch dealt with its story in-game. However, unlike it was in Overwatch, Nottingham confirmed that the characters will change their voice lines as their stories move forward, which means that Riot already has some plans to give Valorant a progressive story. This may scare some of you, because Blizzard promised the exact same thing, and yet Overwatch's story never really went anywhere. On the other side, seeing how good Riot has been with the story of League of Legends lately, I trust Riot that they will actually let the world of Valorant progress forward. And hopefully it won't be just stuck in one place for 3 years. What is interesting is that Nottingham mentioned Fortnite as an example of a good large-scale storytelling in a repetitive game. And to be honest, I think he's right. Despite the lack of real story in Fortnite, their changing world actually makes the game feel fresh, and it makes the players feel like the game is moving forward. So even if Riot didn't write extensive stories for Valorant, and they just focused on changing the maps every time an event happened, I would be totally fine with it. A game doesn't need massive epic tales of heroes to be interesting. Sometimes subtle but clever storytelling can be even better. At the end of the article, Polygon mentioned that Valorant was highly polished, and the game simply felt right. Which is interesting because from the visual side, players in general aren't too impressed. But then again, there are far too many games that look just fine and are still amazing because the gameplay is too good. And from what Polygon is saying, it seems like Valorant can definitely be another one of these gameplay gems. For the last part of this video, let me quickly blitz through all the characters and all the known abilities. We don't know all the details yet, but it seems like each agent has 2 normal abilities which you can buy with money, a signature ability that will be more expensive, and an ultimate ability which you can gain by reaching a certain score. In this case, you wouldn't be spending money to get it, but you still need to play well to unlock the ultimate ability. There is Phoenix, which is this British guy who has the ability to throw flames around. He has a flame grenade that deals damage to enemies and heals himself. He can also create a wall of flame that blocks vision and damages enemies. His signature ability is a flash grenade, which you can throw in a curve. In other words, you can throw it behind corners. And his ultimate ability is called Run It Back. When you use it, you mark your current location, and when you die or when the ability expires, you will return to that location with full health. Then we have Jet, a South Korean who can wield the wind. She has a smoke grenade that can obscure vision. She also has a high jump, which makes her a lot more mobile. Her signature ability is a dash, which works exactly like Tracer's dash. And her ultimate is Blade Storm. She summons 6 flying knives that you can aim like any other gun. And if you get a kill with it, all the knives get restored. And headshots with these knives are instant kills. Viper is an agent with poison abilities. She can create a pool of damaging acid. She can also drop down a trap that eats fuel and emits poison cloud. Her signature is creating a wall of toxic gas that also eats fuel. And her ultimate makes a massive toxic cloud that lasts as long as Viper stands in it. Sova is a Russian scout. Fun fact, in Middle Eastern Europe the word Sova means owl, which makes a lot more sense now. His first ability fires out an electric arrow that pulls his damage in area around it. He also has a scouting drone which he can control. He can even shoot enemies with it to reveal them. His signature is an arrow that reveals enemies around it. And his ultimate fires 3 energy blasts that travel across the entire map. Anyone caught in this will take massive damage and will be revealed. Cypher is your typical spy. He can place tripwires around the map to root and reveal enemies. He also has a remote activation trap that slows everyone around it. His signature is placing down a camera. He can check what the camera sees at any point, and he can even shoot a tracking dart with it. His ultimate ability allows him to reveal the location of all enemies every time he inspects a dead enemy. Brimstone is a heavy artillery guy. His grenade deploys a field of fire. He can also drop down a beacon that speeds up everyone's firing speed, even the enemies if they get near it. His signature calls down an orbital strike that drops down smoke screens, and his ultimate calls down an orbital strike that kills everything. CZECH is a Japanese healer. As a person who likes to play hybrid characters that can heal and deal damage at the same time, this may be my person. She can throw out an exploding orb that slows everyone and that makes noise, so it is hard to listen for footsteps. Her barrier orb makes a large solid wall that can be broken with damage. Her signature is a healing orb, which is the only ability in the game that can heal friendly targets. And as we all know, her ultimate allows her to resurrect one target. And finally, Omen is your Reaper. His first ability sends out a shadow that reduces the field of vision of anyone it touches. He can also teleport a short distance, just like Reaper. His signature is an orb that explodes into a massive sphere of shadows that obscures vision. And his ultimate allows you to teleport to any spot on the map. When he arrives at the selected spot, he will appear as a shade for a while before he fully materializes. And if he is killed as a shade, he will just teleport back to his original location. But for now, that's all the things we know about Valorant. So far, I do agree that the characters are missing their unique quirks that would make them stand apart. But I also understand that it is hard to do that if you want to give all characters the same hitboxes. Which makes me wonder, how diverse will the skins be, if Riot decided to sell any? I mean, I have full faith that the monetization will be fair for everyone. But it also makes me wonder, since stats trackers are common in first-person shooters, was Riot testing us with Eternals?